couple of months ago, after helping my mother sell her house and find an independent assisted living place, I had another challenging experience. My plan was to travel to my daughter and son-in-law out of state and to give them the comfort and peace of mind that I would take care of their home and their beloved dog Winston, who we affectionately call Winnie, while the two of them went on a well-deserved and much-needed one-week vacation. They've both been stressed and overwhelmed, having been working in the healthcare field for several years, and particularly during the pandemic, and dealing with all the added stress that brought on. The second week of my trip was to be spent enjoying quality time with my daughter and the freedom of being away and taking a break and enjoying life. I'd been looking forward to this trip for some time and had clear intentions of how I was going to spend quality time with myself while my loved ones were away on vacation. Being productive, especially in a place without the usual distractions of home life. On day one, after traveling for many hours and arriving in the evening, my daughter invited me to take a walk with her and Winnie to get reacquainted with the area and the walking route, etc. So, as tired as I was, I said, okay, and off we went. At first, things were going fine. I'd walked Winnie many times in the past without issues. However, in the early evening as we were returning from our walk, coming down the hill in the neighborhood, Winnie spotted one of his playmates in the distance at the neighborhood dog park, a Great Dane that he often plays with. And he got so excited that the power and strength that he exerted became completely overwhelming for me to handle. My daughter saw what was happening and that I was unable to control his pulling and tugging, and she started shouting, let go of the leash, Mom, just let him go. But unfortunately, I couldn't let go. Why was I unable to let go? Because of the way I had wrapped his leash over my bicep and around my arm, I thought this was a brilliant grip. It would ensure my control. Instead, it prevented me from simply releasing him. What happened next was very traumatic for me, as it was for my daughter and even a neighbor who witnessed the accident from the dog park. It happened in seconds, so fast I didn't know what hit me. I got pulled down to the ground, face first, and dragged, until finally the leash did come off my arm. As I reflect on this accident, it's become a metaphor for my own recovery and the importance of letting go. Letting go of that stranglehold grip on people, places, and things that we can't control. And the tighter I had wrapped and enmeshed myself with the leash, and the more I resisted the direction in which things were going, the more pain I experienced. It made me think about how often in the past my resistance and inability to accept what is not only hasn't helped others, but caused me much more pain in the long run. In the moments that followed, I was in a state of shock, lying face down, unable to move. I was intensely aware that my right shoulder had become dislocated, and I was in excruciating pain and shock. As I attempted to slowly get up, I felt my shoulder pop back into the socket. It was a pain that I hadn't known since I fractured my wrist during a rolling blade outing with my children some 10 years earlier. Again, I'm reminded of how, during that incident, I went to the full extent to protect my kids when we were rollerblading by making sure that they wore helmets and wrist guards, elbow guards, knee pads. But why didn't I think to give myself the same care and protection? Hindsight is 20/20, they say. So when the dog walking accident happened, we were just across the street from my daughter's house, and I was able to stagger back and find a bag of frozen fruit in the freezer, which I used to ice my shoulder temporarily. My daughter had been pulled down by Winnie before and also incurred several injuries while walking him. And I thought about the responsibility we have to teach and train not only our children as best we can, but our fur babies as well, so that they can learn obedience and acceptable behavior. As responsible adults, it's our job to establish boundaries and limitations, not to punish or control others, but to protect ourselves. This just reemphasizes the importance of boundaries, and it makes me think of how, unfortunately, I lived most of my life without having any, without knowing that I was even allowed to have boundaries. It wasn't long before we made our way to the emergency room, where it was confirmed that my shoulder was fractured. I was in excruciating pain, and all they could do was put me in a sling and send me home with an ice pack and enough pain meds to get me through the weekend. As a recovery coach, I was very sensitive to the fact that opioids were habit forming, and yet I understood in a whole other personal way once my prescription ran out and I was frantic and unable to get a refill. The pain was nearly unbearable at times. I was still determined to do what I had set out to do by coming there, and I was aware that I would have to make some alterations to my plans. But I wasn't going to let my daughter and son-in-law cancel their trip. I didn't know how I was going to manage, but I knew that somehow God would help and I would get through it. Asking for help was something that I wasn't very comfortable with doing, but in my current condition, I was very limited physically, and I had to stretch beyond my comfort zone, whether I liked it or not. And I had to rely on helpful neighbors who came by to assist me with walking the dog and other things that I couldn't physically do on my own. I developed a great appreciation for normally being an able-bodied person, something we don't often think about until it's suddenly taken away and we're limited in some way or another. In my case, everything became a struggle. Personal hygiene, bathing, dressing were very difficult. I couldn't lift or cook or type. I couldn't wash my own hair. I had to learn how to feed myself with my left hand. What I also developed was a great sense of gratitude for the kindness that was offered by the neighbors. It was painful recovering, and I knew it was going to be a long road, and I was frustrated about that. But I came to accept that, like everything else in life, my healing would come in God's time, not in my time. And I started to look at this challenge as an opportunity to give myself the grace and space to heal, to learn and to grow, not only in terms of my acceptance of a situation I could not change, but also I developed new coping strategies and skills with my left non-dominant hand, and convinced myself that at my age it was good for my brain anyway. After a couple of weeks, I returned to my home in Florida and went to see an orthopedic who confirmed that the pain would last for quite a while, maybe as much as a year, but that I was lucky that the injury wasn't worse and it wouldn't require surgery. In time, with physical therapy, I would be okay again. The doctor mentioned how common it was for him to see patients with injuries from dog walking accidents. You just don't realize how common things are until they happen to you. Then it's like everywhere you look, people are going through similar struggles, just like with family recovery.